JJ, thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. I am Paige Panzarello. I am the cash flow chick. And I have been in mastery since 2014. I can't believe it. I came in late 2013, but really started kind of down my path in mastery in 2014. And I was I have to say that I was an experienced real estate investor, and about 25 years, and real estate chose me. I did not choose real estate. I was thrown into the deep end of the pool at a very young age, so my mid 20s. So I just dated myself, right? Because I've been in for 25 years. So my mid 20s, and my grandmother passed away, and she had a very large estate that was $4 million in debt. And we had holdings in California and also in Arizona. And so I went off to Arizona knowing nothing about real estate or real estate investing. And there weren't groups like this. So, I really had to force myself to surround myself with people that had the answers to the questions that I needed to ask. And we had 38 townhome units, we had a sewer treatment plant, and we had some land. And the townhome units were only 40% occupied, and the other 60%, over half of those were broken. They were mid-rehab, or they needed to be rehabbed. They were not habitable. So I was fixing and flipping before I knew what fixing and flipping was. So 38 townhome units, and I was very, very fortunate that I was able to work with my local community and tell them, I was going to pay them. And I laid out my plan of how I was going to do that. And they were willing to work with me to get the units up and running so I could pay them. And so within a very short period of time, about 18 months, I had all of the units repaired and we were 100% occupied. But I quickly realized, because we were in a very boutique market in Arizona, that I was not going to be able to sustain being profitable. And so I quickly decided that it's time to sell these units and then take that money and sell the sewer treatment plant, which we did, and take that money and build on the land. And my family wanted no part of that. So I leveraged some assets and I bought the corporation from my family. I hired a contractor. I designed a project, a plan, a 25-unit townhome complex. And I knew nothing about construction or building or anything. I just was really bold and fearless those days. And so I hired that contractor, and I realized that he was going to bankrupt me before I came out of the ground. So I fired him and I started my own construction company. Again, knowing nothing about construction at all. And I found a qualifying party, and that person came in and we held all of our licenses except for HVAC and roofing. And the only reason we didn't have those is because the insurance was way too high. And we started building. Now, this was early 2000s, right? So before the really big boom in 2005 and the subsequent crash in 2007, 2008. And we were building, and I grew very fast. We ended up with 36 employees, and I was making money hand over fist. But I'll tell you, I was putting myself in an early grave because I was working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and my health was suffering. I was away from my family. I was away from my friends because I was off in Arizona and everybody I knew was in California. And I didn't know how, the money was great, but that's not going to do me any good if my health is gone. So I was trying to figure out, how am I going to, scale this back? And life intervened and the crash came. And I call that a very difficult learning experience, but I also call it a blessing. Here's why. It forced me to slow down. Unfortunately, people that owed me money could not pay me. I was very lucky because I had a lot of liquidity. I had a lot of assets, a lot of cash flowing properties. I had large equipment. I had other big parcels of land. And I was able to sell all of those things off and pay everybody that I owed money to. I chose not to go the bankruptcy route, because I had those things and I could pay everybody off, even though it was to my own detriment. And at the end of 3 years, I did just that. I fire sailed everything I owned. I paid everybody I owed money to. But at the end of the day, I walked out of Arizona having lost $20 million. Now, that's a huge amount of money. And I don't mean to be cavalier about it. And it sounds crazy to call that a blessing, but it truly was, because it taught me who I am as a person. It taught me who I am as an investor. It shaped me. It molded me. It taught me how I relate with other people, right? How I build relationships, how I treat money, and what my risk tolerances are. And so as I left Arizona penniless, I came back and I came back to California to my family. I licked my wounds a little bit, and I went away from real estate for a little while. And when I came back in, and I did come back because it's a passion of mine. It's a part of me. I was good at it and I enjoy it. But I knew I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to be in command of my own life. So because I had to build my capital back up, I did exactly what everybody else does, right? You start wholesaling, you start fixing and flipping, and you kind of build from there. But when I came back in, and even when I started with Fortune Builders, at that point, I had already been studying, and I had already purchased some notes at that point. However, Fortune Builders gave me the foundation and the community and the systems that I have been able to implement into my own business. Okay. But I had been studying about this notes. I had heard about it. What is this notes thing? What are those? And so there wasn't a lot of information at that point, but I did find a mentor and I started studying, and then I had accumulated a little money and I put it into my first note and I turned that around. And I'll tell you, when I hit this space, angels really did sing for me. It checked all of the boxes in who I am as an investor. It checked all of my risk tolerances. Now, when I originally was in my 20s and went to Arizona, I had very high risk tolerance, right? I could be risky. But now, especially after having gone through what I went through, I'm very risk averse. So I wanted something that created chunks of cash, streams of monthly cash flow, and also was low risk. And that's why notes it just sang for me. And I think after today, you're going to understand a little bit of why that happens for me. So let's get into it a little bit. What are notes? Notes are basically just a debt instrument, everybody. It's a promise to pay. And you'll hear me talk about notes and becoming the bank. And yes, you literally become the bank for somebody. So we're buying debt. However, it is secured. So there's a variety of different notes that you can buy. There's first position notes, there's second position notes, there's HELOCs, which is home equity line of credit, right? Every time every one of you has a private lender, you sign to finance your rehab, right? You sign a note, which is your promise to pay, and at a certain rate, for over a certain period of time, at a certain monthly payment, right? That's what a note is, right? They're mortgages or deeds of trust. And your private lender becomes your bank. So you literally do become the bank. In terms of the different types of notes, you can buy car loans, you can buy real estate debt, you can buy credit card debt. That's unsecured, right? Cars and real estate are secured. They're secured by the house or the building or the car, right? And there are performing notes, which means that notes the borrower is paying on time, every time, consistently. And then there's non-performing notes, which means that the borrower has stopped paying, okay? I focus on first position, non-performing notes that are secured by real estate, okay? First position, because I like to get paid first. Non-performing, it sounds kind of crazy. Why on earth would I buy a non-performing note? Especially if I'm the cash flow chick and I want cash flow. Crazy like a fox, I will tell you, because in a non-performing note situation, we do an evaluation for our purchase price based on the current market value of the securing collateral, which is the house. And then we get a very big discount from there. Okay, so we're not looking at ARV. As you know, in fixing and flipping, we look at ARV and then we back out our percentages to come up with our MAO, right? Our maximum allowable offer. But in note investing, we don't look at ARV. We look at current market value of the securing collateral and we discount the purchase price of the note from there. And I'm going to give you some numbers in a few minutes, okay? So that's the reason that I focus on non-performing notes, because I build in a cushion of equity right off the top and I mitigate my risk when I do that, okay? I'm often asked, is there competition in note investing? And yes, I mean, just like any other real estate investing, there's competition, of course. However, I call it the gentler form of real estate investing. It's a much more collaborative space. And anybody who's fixing and flipping right now, especially in California, you know that people are outbidding, going way over asking on these broken houses, right? In the note space, it's not that way. We deal with relationships and asset managers. We make our bid based on our numbers, that has a certain level of due diligence. And there's a tremendous amount of due diligence in the beginning when you buy a note, before you buy the note. But we are able to kind of even mitigate that competition, because the numbers are the numbers are the numbers. If the numbers work, then great. Our asset manager we make our bid. Our asset manager will either say yes, no, or counter. But there's none of this, craziness and overbidding and frenzy that you might find perhaps in the fixing and flipping world. So yes, there is competition, but it is a lot more gentle. Also in this space, note investors work together. It's very collaborative, and asset managers work with you as well. So they'll refer you to other asset managers. So it's really that we're creating win-win situations all throughout the community, and everybody really does work together, which is pretty awesome. How do I find deals? I'm going to tell you that I spend zero marketing dollars to get my deals. No money at all. I do not do yellow letters. I do not knock on doors. I do not drive for dollars. I don't do cold calling. I don't do any of that stuff. How I get deals that come literally right to my inbox is that I create relationships. I go to conferences. That's where I spend my money, is I go to conferences that deal with notes. I meet asset managers and other note investors, and I build relationships. That's all I do. It's a very easy and simple way to have deals come right to your inbox for free. And I love building those relationships because, again, we're in a very collaborative space. And it fits my model of who I am. I would much rather spend my time and my money in a conference and building a relationship, much like what JJ is doing, right? He's focused a lot of time and energy in building this amazing group. And that's all about building relationships. And so that's how I get my deals. They literally come to my inbox because I've built a relationship, not because I've sent anything through the mail. Okay. And if you have questions, everybody, we'll get to them afterwards. So don't worry. Okay. Also, one of the things for me when I was in Arizona, I was stuck in Arizona. It was hard for me to come home. And I heard one of you say earlier that you're exhausted because you were just at your rehab job site, right? So sometimes it can be a job. The beauty part about note investing is that I literally can do this business anywhere in the world, as long as I have a phone and an internet connection. So I'm not beholden to any specific location, which is another box that it checked for me. Now, as we all know, our real estate cycle has been going up, but I did want to bring in some current market trends that have been happening, because it's going to present a tremendous opportunity for note investors, okay? And even for rehabbers, for fix and flippers and buy and hold people, okay? COVID has brought quite an interesting situation, let's put it. And it hasn't quite happened yet, but I do want to share some current market trends with you, okay? Now, I subscribe to a service, so I watch these numbers. Life happens to people every day, everybody. So notes and note investing, distressed mortgages are not going anywhere anytime soon because life happens to people every single day. Death, divorce, downsizing, medical conditions, all of those things happen. And so people become delinquent in their mortgages. And the beauty part is that I get to make a living. I get to build my wealth by helping people. So my focus is typically to help people stay in their homes. And we're going to get to that in a minute. All right. So in November of 2019, now this is just my little asset class, right? This is just residential real estate, single family residence is 1 to 4. Okay. This is just first position liens. So this is not commercial, agricultural, industrial, multifamily, none of that. And it's not second position or HELOCs. This is just first position, single family homes secured by that residential real estate. Okay. Now, you will see here that at the end of November 2019, there was $57.46 billion in non-accrual debt, or in delinquent debt, I should say. 38 billion and change of that 57 is 90 days or more past due. Okay, so of that, there's a tremendous amount of mortgage debt just in my class, my asset class. COVID hit, and the numbers went through the roof. So at the end of September 2020 and also December 2020, those numbers are almost exactly the same. And the reason for that is that the government propped us up. The government came up with EIDL loans. They sent out stimulus checks. Forbearance agreements were being put in place, which is basically a delay of your delinquent payments. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. So those numbers were the same because the government was propping us up, moratoriums on foreclosure, et cetera. So at the end of December, right, and the end of September and the end of December, we had an increase in delinquent mortgages to $75.53 billion. That is a difference, everybody, of $18 billion. That spells massive opportunity for us as note investors, as real estate investors, really, if we're positioned well. Okay. Now, I will say that's a 23.92% increase. That is unprecedented. That has never happened in the history of our country, not even in 2008. So we have reached levels, and we're not being told this, everybody, because if everybody knew this, there would be massive panic happening, okay, across the board. So I'm watching these numbers, and pretty soon, especially because the moratoriums are starting to kind of wind down, that we're going to have a tremendous amount of product. Remember, everything that people look for, deals and money, money and deals, right? So there's a tremendous amount of product that is going to be flooding the market, which is going to drive prices for note investors down. Okay. So I promised you in the beginning, when JJ and I talked about what today's talk is going to be like, I'm going to show you how that deal flows to you as well. Okay. All right, some headlines throughout last year. Distressed debt balloons to almost $1 trillion. Now that's all distressed mortgages, okay? Nears 2008 peak. I want you to know we have surpassed the 2008 peak. Mortgage defaults could pile up at a pace that dwarfs 2008. That's already happening, everybody. That's already happening. So the opportunities are here. It's terrible that this is happening to people across our country, but it puts us in a very good position to be able to build our wealth and help people. All right. One more thing I wanted to point out, there's a gentleman, if you've ever heard of a fund called Oak Tree Capital. Oak Tree Capital is a very large hedge fund. They have $19.4 billion under management. Howard Marks is the gentleman that runs that fund. And he, in the middle of last year, in the middle of 2020, Oak Tree is setting up a separate fund, a brand new fund, just to buy distressed mortgages, AKA notes, just to buy distressed mortgages. And that fund is $15 billion. Now, do you think he's stupid, or do you think that he knows something that most people don't know? Well, yeah, he knows something most people don't know, which is why they're setting that fund up and why I am positioning and my students from my workshops are positioning themselves to take advantage of this flood of inventory that's about to hit us. Okay. Okay, so let's talk some exit strategies. We have 23 different exit strategies in note investing, which mitigates a tremendous amount of risk, but obviously we're not going to use all 23. We generally use 4, okay? And I'm going to run some numbers for you here just to kind of give you an idea about how this might translate into you and your business, whether you're fixing and flipping or holding, buying and holding, or if you want to do both. If you want to be a note investor and use the back door, I call it the backdoor way of investing, to get some of these properties at a much lower amount. And you're going to see that in just a moment. Okay, so unpaid principal balance. Principal balance is just that. It's just the unpaid amount of the loan that is sitting on the books. So let's say for easy numbers, because today is Saturday, it's been a long week, $100,000. Okay, so the unpaid principal balance of this loan, this mortgage, this note is $100,000. The legal collectible balance is all the default interest, any fees or taxes that we pay on behalf of the borrower, and all of those fees and amounts that become due are called the legal collectible balance. So let's say for this example, the legal collectible balance is $120,000. Now, I told you that I base my purchase price on the current market value of the securing collateral, which is the house. So in this example, the current market value of the securing collateral is $80,000. So clearly our borrower is in the hole already by $40,000. Okay, they owe 120, but their house is only worth 80. Now I'm going to buy that note at a much discount, a very big discount off of that current market value, off of that $80,000. I buy that note for easy numbers. We're going to say 50%. So I buy that note where I'm owed 120, but I buy the note for $40,000. Now, just like fixing and flipping houses, you have a rehab cost, right? I have a rehab cost too, because I'm fixing and flipping debt. I'm fixing and flipping the paper. So my rehab costs, we call them workout costs, for this example is $5,000. So I'm all in for this note at $45,000, okay? But I'm owed 120. Anything over that $80,000 is gravy, all right? So I'm basing all of my numbers on the $80,000 and I'm building in a cushion of equity of $35,000. That's a tremendous amount of equity and cushion that if the market does take a dip or a downturn, then I'm still protected, okay? Because I'm buying at such a big discount. Now you understand crazy like a fox. So let's talk about the 4 main exit strategies that I typically use day in and day out. Everybody knows what foreclosure is, of course. Some of us live in non-judicial foreclosure states. Some of us live in judicial foreclosure states. So foreclosure is my least favorite exit strategy. And it typically takes anywhere between 6 months and 16 months, depending if it's judicial versus non-judicial. Now, because I know who I am as an investor, I want my money turning as quickly as possible. So I do invest in judicial foreclosure states, but there are some judicial foreclosure states that I avoid, largely because their foreclosure process time takes 4 years. New York is one of them. So I typically will not, not always, but typically will not buy in New York. Unless the foreclosure process has already been started, because I don't want my money sitting out there for 4 years. Okay. So I focus on states that are 16 months or less and it used to be 12 months or less, but because of where we are in the state of the country today, the courts are a bit backed up. So I had to add a little extra time, right? So 16 months, 16 months is my max. I like to cap out at 16 months. Now, let's say, and every foreclosure is an auction. It has to be. It keeps the banks honest, okay? But the beauty part is, as the bank, we actually control the starting bid. So if you want the property, if you're a fix and flipper and you want the property, Of that $120,000 that we're owed, you can set the bid at $120,000, and no one's going to bid on it because the house is only worth 80 as it sits, right? So very likely nobody's going to buy it, and now you've taken possession of that home as REO. Now you have a variety of things that you can do with that, right? You can sell it as is if you don't want to fix and flip it. We anticipated a current market value of $75,000 or of $80,000, but what if we were able to turn it around in a non-judicial state and sell it for $70,000 in 6 months, right? That's called a return on transaction. I don't use ROI, I use ROT, return on transaction, because it's a much shorter time frame. So, I would do that deal all day long. Because I didn't make the 35 I was expecting, but I certainly did make the 25 that I was expecting, and I didn't swing a hammer, right? You could, if you want to take that property back. If you don't want the property, you set the bid a little bit lower and you hope that it sells at foreclosure auction to a third party and you collect a check, okay? Short sale, we all know what a short sale is. I'm sure that there have been plenty of you that have participated in offering on short sales to the bank. Now, back in 2008, all the way through 2013, it would take about 9 to 18 months typically for a short sale to happen. But because I'm Mrs. Chase, I can make a decision if, let's say, our borrower says, I don't want this house. I want out of this house. Are you willing to take a short sale? Are you willing to accept money, less money than I owe you? Of course, I'm going to say yes. And keep in mind that value is in the eye of the beholder, everybody. Just because the current market value of the property is only $80,000 doesn't mean that buyer or that neighbor or the buyer wouldn't pay $90,000. So in this example, in 3 to 6 months, I could sell this as a short sale to perhaps a neighbor or somebody who wants it that's willing to pay the $90,000, right? So now I've made over what I expected to make in a very short period of time. It's a velocity of capital, okay? Deed in lieu of foreclosure, that's our third exit strategy. This is where the borrower comes to us and says, I'm willing to sign the deed of this house over to you, Mrs. Chase, Mrs. Bank, right? In lieu of you foreclosing on me. I'm willing to give you the property as payment in full for my loan if you don't foreclose on me, okay? This process can take 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it will take longer. Sometimes it will take less time. It just depends on how quickly our loss mitigation team can meet with the borrower, okay? And again, this is something that we can say yes or no. We don't have to accept the deed in lieu of foreclosure, but we could, and we have therefore bypassed the entire foreclosure process. Now we have the option, the house has come back to us as REO, real estate owned, right? And we can do any number of things with it. We can fix and flip it ourselves. We can sell it as an REO for $80,000. We can make a short-term rental, right? We can put a tenant in there. We can fix it and put it as a buy and hold and put a tenant in there. We can be the bank for a fix and flipper, right? So you can actually create 2 streams of income on that same property because you can now, have a higher sales price than what you anticipated, or what you paid. And then you can also be a private money lender to a fix and flipper. So there's a variety of different things that we can do as a note investor. And I think probably you're seeing kind of some potential here on how you can kind of go through the back door to get some of the properties that you want to fix and flip or fix and hold. And again, it's a lot more gentle because we're not outbidding each other, and going over asking on these broken properties. Okay. Now, reperforming, and I want to say something very quickly about the deed in lieu and the short sale strategies and even the foreclosure strategies. My favorite is to work with my borrower to give them a second chance and get them to reperform. Okay. If you want the property, I would hope that you would invest in notes, if you go the note route, that you would invest in notes on properties that are already vacant. It's no fun, take it from me, it's no fun kicking people out of their house. It just isn't. So, there's plenty of properties that are out there that are vacant. And you can use this strategy on those vacant properties if you want the property. So I just urge you to go in that direction. If you have no compunction about kicking people out, that's okay too. I mean, there's no judgment here. I prefer to work with my borrower and get them to reperform. Okay. And it's hard on me personally to kick people out. So, but I do. I mean, this is a business. I'm not a philanthropy. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it happens. Okay. So my favorite is reperforming. The reperforming situation is where we do work hand in hand with the borrower to get them to reperform. Okay. Generally, I will require that it takes about 6 to 12 months in a time frame to make this happen. Generally, I will require the borrower to have some skin in the game. They'll come up with a small deposit, and then they have to cash flow. They have to make their monthly payments, so it's cash flow to me for a short period of time, 6 months, in a trial payment plan, which is also known as a forbearance agreement. Okay. So during that trial payment plan, all of that money applies to the old loan. If they are successful in their trial payment plan, then we convert to a loan modification and put a brand new loan in place. So the trial money, that's all free money to me, everybody, because it goes toward the old loan, not toward the new loan. So it's a great way to generate income and create a win-win situation with your borrower. Now, as the bank, again, the banks are the ones that are in control. So I'm in control of this situation. For our $120,000 that the borrower owes us, let's say, again, values in the eye of the beholder. If they want to stay in their house, they don't care that the property is only worth $80,000. If I make them an offer that I'm going to reduce and forgive $20,000 of their debt, they might be thrilled, right? We can do all different kinds of things. We can lower interest rates. We can lower the unpaid principal balance. We can raise interest rates. So it's an interesting strategy. If you lower the unpaid principal balance, but raise the interest rate, it will level out the payment. But most of the interest, that's your profit, everybody, is going into your pocket. So there's all different kinds of things that we can do in a reperforming situation. And we want to make sure to set our borrower up to succeed, though. Don't set them up to fail. We want to make sure it's palatable and manageable for them to succeed. Okay. So our borrower might spend, be okay with doing a trial payment to a loan modification for $100,000. And after they're successful, then we'll reset the loan, and then we will create a chunk of cash like we did in the beginning, and then streams of monthly cash flow. So if you're a buy and hold person and you're looking for cash flow without the headache of tenants and toilets, you might consider note investing, because I'll tell you, once you're building in not only equity into the house by doing this strategy with what you're into it for, but it will cash flow for you without having them call you at midnight because the toilet's overflowing, right? Okay. How important is due diligence? Massively important. Okay. We don't have time today to talk about due diligence, but in note investing, due diligence is paramount. Due diligence is paramount in any type of real estate investing, but especially in note investing. I call it very front-end loaded, because you spend the majority of your time in note investing doing your due diligence prior to buying the note. And then once you buy the note, you hand it off to your teams and they handle the day-to-day. Okay. So very front-end loaded. And there's a lot of due diligence. Don't get me wrong. If you don't know the due diligence steps to take, you can get hurt. And in the workshop, we go over all of the due diligence that you need to do to avoid that. Good due diligence gives you virtually risk-free note investing, everybody. And I like to say there's no such thing as buying a bad note, or there's no such thing as a bad note, but there is such thing as buying a note badly. Okay, so some case studies. I'm going to kind of run through this quickly because I'm looking at the time. And these are from my actual portfolio, okay? This particular asset we bought, it was in Casa Grande, Arizona, was a duplex, was the securing collateral. We knew, because we did our good due diligence, that it was that it was occupied. Both sides of the duplex were occupied, but we didn't know by who. We knew the current market value of the securing collateral, the duplex, was between $120,000 and $125,000. Okay. Our all-in for this non-performing note was $64,500. We acquired, that's purchase price and workout costs. We acquired it in late 2018. Again, it was occupied by unknown persons. We ended up foreclosing on this note, and it did not sell at foreclosure auction, which actually really surprised me. It came back to us as REO, and that ended up being a blessing because we actually ended up making a bit more money. Now, our loss mitigation team, who is part of our team, they're licensed debt collectors. They recommended that we evict the people that were living in the property. And I thought, I don't want to do that. Let's send out a door knocker. So we sent out a door knocker. Sure enough, those families had been living there. One had been there for 5 years. Another had been there for 7. And they were paying rent to a property manager. Our door knocker secured the property manager's name and telephone number. And we contacted them. Sure enough, they had received notification of the foreclosure. And they had a chunk of rent that was sitting in their trust account. So we were able to collect that. So we cash flowed. We told her that we wanted to sell the property to recapture our capital, and asked her if she had an investor that wanted to buy a fully loaded asset. And she said, yes, I do. And so 21 days later, we sold that property to the cash buyer for $120,000. We paid her, the property manager, a small commission, so not even a full commission. And we ended up with a profit of $54,500, which is a 54% return on transaction. This whole process took about 7.5 months. Okay, so return on transaction was 54%. Our JV partner portion was 27%, and he was thrilled. Okay, so I think some light bulbs are going on. Now, this one, don't fall in love with the houses, everybody. I am a rehabber at heart. I love making ugly things pretty. This is a beautiful old Victorian in Virginia. There were some squatters that had done some damage. The current market value of this property was $125,000. Because I fell in love with the property, I admit it. I wanted to check the ARV. The ARV on this was $225, okay? All in for this note, $54,200. Our borrower was deceased, and the heirs did not want anything to do with this property, nor did they want anything to do with giving us a deed in lieu of foreclosure, okay? Because I did have aspirations of rehabbing this property. The area was a little sketchy at first, but because of our good due diligence, we found out that it was in the process of gentrification, okay? And right across the street was a brand new rehab that was almost completed. Next to this property and down the street was multifamily, okay? So there were apartment buildings. So, and we found out this property was zoned R3, so anybody who bought it could literally tear this down and build an apartment building. I had hoped that no one would do that, and thankfully they didn't, but it was a possibility. Again, squatters had done some minor damage to this property. Inside, there was a small fire in an area, but for the most part, even though it was a 100-year-old Victorian, it had been updated. It needed to be updated more, but it had been updated, okay? Now, our legal collectible balance on this was $217,000 and change, right? Our unpaid principal balance, so just the principal portion of that, was $160,000. Keep in mind that it was only worth $125,000 as current market value. We as the bank could have, if I really wanted to keep this property, I could have started the auction at $217,000. That could have been my opening bid, because again, I'm the controlling factor in this. My thoughts prevailed because I'm in California and this is in Virginia. And I thought, let's recapture some capital. Let's see if we can sell this at foreclosure auction. So we set the opening bid a little bit low, $116,828. And we did that because we wanted to create a bidding war. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. We sold this property at foreclosure auction for $124,000 and change. Our net profit was $70,000, 129% return on transaction. This also happened in less than a year, everybody. I did not swing a single hammer. I just did good due diligence and I bought the paper, right? Our JV partner was elated because his portion was 65% return on transaction. Again, less than a year. Now, because I am a rehabber and a former rehabber, I should say, I kept up with this property. So the upper picture is the picture that our realtor took. The lower picture is the screenshot I took when the buyer put it back on Zillow. Sure enough, they had done some rehab and they sold this property for $230,000. Okay, now imagine if you bought this note and you rehabbed it and you sold it. And your profit margins go through the roof, right? Pretty amazing. So now you can see, I hope you're starting to see that there's deal flow to be had here, okay? Okay, and this is the last one. I know we've only got a few more minutes. This one is my favorite. This is Richmond, Kentucky. One of my favorites, I should say, but it's my favorite exit strategy. Their last paid to date. Now, we bought this in late 2018. Their last paid to date was 4/9 of 2012. They had literally been squatting in their own house for 6 years, okay? Our all-in for this note was $49,252. Again, our good due diligence showed that this was owner-occupied since 1998. Now, again, my favorite exit strategy is that I want to work with my borrower to stay in their home, okay? So I had a pretty good idea that we're going to be able to do that with this borrower. The legal collectible balance on this was $95,000 and change, and they had a huge interest rate at 10.99%. These aren't bad people, everybody. It just, life happened to them, right? So at the time when all of this started, the husband had a medical condition and couldn't work for 3 years, but has gotten better since. Right. So we took a chance and we said, okay, let's see if they want to stay. Sure enough, our loss mitigation team contacted them. Yes, they were desperate to stay in their home. Their family had been raised in that home. And so they were desperate to stay and nobody was willing to work with them until I came along. In March of 2019, we put a trial payment plan in place and that was for 6 months. Okay. We gave them several different options. One of the options included giving us a $1,000 deposit as a good faith deposit. And they were going to pay a trial payment plan for 6 months at $708.40 per month. Now, the way that we structured the new deal, what was going to be the loan modification, was the monthly payment, P&I payment, was $608. But our loss mitigation team charges a success fee. And so we passed that charge on along to the borrower. So our borrower paid us $708.40 for 6 months. They were successful, okay? So we created... I'm sorry, they were successful for those 6 months at 708. All of that money, the $1,000 deposit and the $708.40 per month, did not apply to the new loan. So that's free money to me, everybody. That applied to the old loan because the new loan hadn't been put in place yet. Okay. Now, if you add all that up, what we ended up doing is we rolled all of the arrearage into a new unpaid principal balance. So we modified the loan, right? We discounted, we forgave some debt. So we discounted the new, the principal balance to $87,500. And then we reduced the interest rate a tremendous amount, 3 points almost, right, to 8%. And then we extended the length of the loan to 40 years. And that made the payment more manageable for our borrower. Our borrowers were thrilled, okay? If you add all that up, the $1,000 deposit plus the $4,248 in the 6 months of trial payment plans, plus the $608.40 per month. That first year, we were looking at a 25.5 cash on cash return. Now, if you look at an amortization schedule, and I know because you're all investors and you do this, if you look at an amortization schedule, the first 2 years of that $608 payment, $580 per month of it was interest. That's pure profit to me, everybody. That the loan balance is very small. I mean, it takes very small reductions, especially in a 40-year loan. But we created a win-win, right? Our borrowers got to keep their house and we get to make money doing it, right? We've created a chunk of cash and I still have this loan in my portfolio today. So I'm cash flowing and they're keeping up. They've been current ever since. And we created that win-win situation. The borrower definitely gets to keep their house. Okay. And I'm just going to mention this because I mentioned it during my presentation, and then I think we're going to we do questions after. I'm not quite sure, but as I mentioned, I do a workshop. People want to know about this. I only do 2 of them a year because I am a note investor. That's what I do. And I limit it to 50 people. So if you're interested in the workshop, hang around till afterwards because I have discount codes and all that fun stuff. And it's coming up. It's next month, May 14th through 16th. So if you're interested, hang out till afterwards and I'll answer questions. I'll give you discount codes. I'll give you all that fun stuff. My contact information, this is me. info@cashflowchick is my email. Instagram @thecashflowchick. You follow me on all the social media, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, all that. And again, my website is cashflowchick.com. If you just have questions, feel free to go to my website and book a call with me directly. As you can hear, that was my little timer. So I think we did it in the time frame allotted. Thank you so much. I hope you guys are excited and inspired and can see how there's a consistent deal flow that can come your way through note investing, and how we can create a couple of different situations where not only we're fixing and flipping houses or buy and hold houses and putting tenants in, but we can also kind of diversify our portfolio and start helping some people stay in their homes as well.